Hello, and welcome back to If History Had Read It. Thank you for joining me here in our quiet corner of the internet. Find your comfortable position, let your shoulders soften, and allow the day to recede. We are about to take a journey, not to the gleaming marble of the Roman Forum or the Senate houses ringing with powerful oratory, but to the raw, unfinished edges of the known world. We travel to the frontier, where the wind carries the scent of damp earth and pine, and the silence is broken only by the rhythmic clang of a hammer or the distant call of a bird. Beyond the glory of Roman triumphs lies the endless, quiet reality of the frontier. This is the world of the common legionary, a life defined less by heroic battle and more by relentless construction, crushing boredom, and the bone-deep chill of a watchtower in a foreign land. If you enjoy what we do and find some comfort in these stories from the past, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps others find this quiet space, and it is, as always, deeply appreciated. Now, settle in. Tonight we explore a world held together by discipline, sweat, and the steadfast presence of the legions at the furthest reaches of their vast empire. We will not walk with Caesars or consult with generals. Instead, we will listen to the murmur of the barracks, the quiet thoughts of men whose names are lost to history, but whose experiences formed the very bedrock of Roman power. We will listen to 4 quiet accounts from the edge of empire, from the men who lived and breathed the trials of a legionary. We will hear from the man who builds the wall, the recruit who counts his coins, the sentry who stares into the darkness, and the veteran who begins to fear the peace he has fought for his entire life. Theirs is a story not of conquest, but of endurance. Let us begin our journey in the northernmost reach of the Roman world, in a province known as Britannia. Imagine a landscape painted in shades of green and gray, a place where the sky often weeps a fine, persistent mist that clings to the rolling hills and settles in the deep, quiet valleys. This is not the sun-scorched earth of Syria or the warm, olive-scented air of Hispania. This is a land of dampness, of deep forests and sprawling moorlands, a place that feels ancient and untamed, even to the disciplined minds of its conquerors. It is here, in the early 2nd century, under the reign of the Emperor Hadrian, that Rome has decided to draw a line in the earth. Not a theoretical line on a map, but a physical, unyielding statement of power and permanence. A wall. This is the project that consumes the lives of 3 full legions, tens of thousands of men, for the better part of a decade. From the mouth of the River Tyne in the east to the Solway Firth in the west, a stone and turf barrier will snake its way across the narrow neck of the island. It is an undertaking of almost unimaginable scale. Every stone must be quarried, shaped, and hauled into place. Every foot of the foundation must be dug from the stubborn, rocky soil. Great defensive ditches, both to the north and to the south of the wall, must be carved out of the earth, their sloping sides measured with geometric precision.
Mile castles, small fortified gates, must be erected at every Roman mile, and between each of them, 2 smaller watchtowers or turrets must stand sentinel. It is a work of order, a testament to the Roman genius for organization and engineering imposed upon a wild landscape. But for the men who build it, it is something else entirely. It is a slow, grinding war fought not against a charging enemy with painted faces, but against the land itself. The true adversaries are the unrelenting rain, the biting wind that whips across the fells, the sheer weight of the stone, and the endless, soul-crushing monotony of the work. The glory of Rome, the grand idea of empire, feels very distant when you are standing waist-deep in cold mud, your back screaming from hours spent swinging a 9-pound pickaxe. Our focus falls upon one such man. We will call him Marius. He is in his 5th year of service with the 6th Legion, the Legio Six Victrix, a unit with a proud and storied history. Marius, however, is not a hero from a grand epic. He is a young man from the south of Gaul, a place of warm sun and vineyards. He joined the army with images in his head, fostered by recruitment posters and the tales of veterans back home, tales of decisive battles, of triumphal parades, of the respect and honor afforded to a soldier of Rome. He signed his name for 25 years of service, believing he was destined to be a conqueror, a bringer of Roman peace through the disciplined application of the sword and shield. For the past 6 months, he has not seen a single enemy warrior. He has not drawn his gladius in anger or stood in a shield wall against a desperate charge. Instead, his days have been governed by the relentless rhythm of construction. He wakes before dawn in a sprawling temporary camp, a city of leather tents laid out in a perfect grid. The air is thick with the smoke of thousands of cook fires and the smell of damp wool and leather. He and the other men of his century eat a quick, functional meal, usually a thick porridge called pulse, or a piece of hard bread dipped in water. There is no time for lingering. The sharp, brassy call of the bucina horn signals the time to assemble.
His unit, his century of 80 men, is not mustered for battle practice. They are issued their work tools, the heavy pickaxe known as a dolabra, the flat-bladed shovel, and the wicker baskets used to haul away earth. They march for a mile or more from the relative order of the camp to their designated section of the great project. For Marius's century, the current task is the fossa, the massive defensive ditch that runs parallel to the wall itself. It is their job to dig. Imagine the scene: a long, shallow depression in the earth, swarming with hundreds of men. Some are loosening the soil and rock with their pickaxes, the rhythmic thud, 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 echoing in the damp air.
Others follow behind, shoveling the loose earth into the wicker baskets. And still others, like Marius, are tasked with carrying the heavy baskets, load after load, up the side of the ditch to be dumped, slowly forming a wide mound of earth on the far side. His world has been reduced to this single, repetitive motion. Fill the basket, hoist it to his shoulder, trudge up the muddy slope, dump the contents, and return for the next one. The conversations are sparse, limited to grunts of effort and the occasional dark joke. The centurion and his optio walk the line, their voices sharp, ensuring the pace never slackens, that the angle of the ditch walls remains precise.
The landscape around them is one of constant, organized destruction. Hillsides are stripped bare as quarries are established. Entire copses of trees are felled for timber scaffolding and fuel. The ground is churned into a sea of mud by the passage of heavy ox carts, dragging massive blocks of stone. This is not the clean, glorious image of Rome. It is its engine room, covered in soot and sweat, powered by the straining muscles of men like Marius. He is a cog in a vast, indifferent machine. And as the cold rain begins to fall yet again, soaking his woolen tunic and chilling him to the bone, the grand promises of the recruitment posters feel like a cruel joke. In the vast, silent archives of history, where the grand narratives of emperors and empires are recorded, there is little room for the simple, weary complaint of a single soldier. But if we listen closely, if we search the quiet spaces between the lines of official records, we can sometimes find a trace of that voice. Let us turn now to a post from a man like Marius, a voice from the cold mud of Britannia, sharing the profound disconnect between the dream of being a Roman soldier and the reality of digging a ditch in the rain.
The fire is mostly embers now, just a dull red glow in the center of the tent. I can hear Sextus snoring. He always sounds like a pig stuck in a bog. On my other side, Gnaeus is muttering in his sleep again, probably dreaming of his wife's cooking. The rest of the men in our tent, our little family of 8, are quiet. The only other sound is the rain. It started again. A soft, steady drumming on the leather roof. It's the sound of this island, the sound of my life now. My hands are clean, but they still feel caked in mud. Under the nails, deep in the lines of my palms. They ache. It's a deep ache in the bones of my fingers, in the joints of my wrists. My back is just one long, dull fire. When I first got here, the pain was sharp. It made me gasp when I straightened up. Now, after all these months, it's just there. It's a part of me, like my own shadow. Sometimes I try to remember what it felt like to wake up in the morning and not feel this ache. I can't. I was strong when I joined. I'd worked my father's land since I was a boy. I thought I knew what hard work was. I didn't. Work on the farm has a purpose you can see. You plow the field, you plant the seed, you watch it grow, you harvest the grain. You feel the sun on your back. Here there is no sun. Only this pale white light behind a blanket of gray cloud. And the work is a kind of madness.
I remember the man who signed me up. He came to our town near Nemesis. He was an optio. His armor was spotless. The plumes on his helmet were bright crimson. He stood in the market square and he spoke of destiny. He spoke of the honor of serving the emperor. He told us we would be the shield of the civilized world. He said we would see wonders, strange lands and stranger people. He said we would earn good pay, a pension, and a plot of land that would make us respected men when our service was done. He had paintings on wooden boards. One showed a legionary standing guard before a magnificent temple in the east, the sun gleaming on his helmet. Another showed a great bridge being built across a wide blue river. Another, a triumphant march through the streets of Rome itself, the crowds cheering, the eagles held high. He never showed a painting of a man covered head to foot in brown mud, trying to get his boot unstuck. He never described the smell of the latrine pits after a week of rain. He never mentioned the feeling of the cold drizzle that finds its way down your neck no matter how you wrap your cloak. He talked about the glory of Rome. He never said that glory smells like wet earth and sour sweat.
Today was like every other day. The horn blew before the sky was even thinking about getting light. The air was cold enough to see my breath. I pulled on my tunic. It's never fully dry. It always feels damp and heavy. We ate the porridge. It tastes of nothing, but it fills your belly. We took up our tools. I have my own Delabra now. The wooden handle is dark and smooth from my hands. I know its weight. I know the exact point of balance. It feels more like a part of my arm than a tool. We march to the line. They call it the Vallum, the Great Ditch. It doesn't look like much. Just a long, muddy wound in the green hills. It stretches on as far as I can see in both directions, disappearing into the mist. And all along it, there are men, hundreds of us, like ants. Some loosening the earth, some shoveling, some carrying. I was on carrying duty today, all day. The basket is wicker. When it's full of wet soil and stones, it's heavier than you can imagine. You squat, get your shoulder under it, and you stand. The muscles in your legs and back scream. You walk up the slippery side of the ditch. You try not to slide back down. Your boots are heavy with mud. You get to the top, you dump the load onto the growing mound, and you turn around. And you see a line of other men doing the same thing. An endless chain of us. We are building a mountain, one basket of mud at a time.
The centurion, a man named Macro, never smiles. He just walks the line, his vine staff in his hand. He doesn't shout much. He doesn't need to. His silence is heavier than any shout. If he stops and looks at you, you just work harder. You push yourself until your lungs burn. You don't want him to speak to you. We don't talk much while we work. Just curses when someone slips or a grunt of effort. The real talking happens at night, back in the tent. But we don't talk about honor or destiny. We talk about blisters. We complain about the rations. We make crude jokes about the native women we never see. We wonder if the next grain shipment will have weevils in it. We talk about anything but the ditch. It's like a silent agreement. We spend all our waking hours there, so we refuse to bring it into our tent with us. I try to write letters home to my father.
I sit with the wax tablet and the stylus, but I don't know what to say. Dear Father, I am serving the Emperor. Today I moved 100 baskets of dirt from one spot to another. Yesterday I did the same. Tomorrow I will do it again. The food is bland and the air is wet. What pride is there in that? He thinks I am a conqueror. He tells everyone in the village his son is a Roman legionary. He probably imagines me fighting painted savages, defending the frontier. I am defending the frontier. But my enemy is geology. My great battle is against a layer of stubborn rock 20 feet down.
Sometimes, in the middle of the day, I'll stop for a moment at the top of the mound. I look out over the land to the north. It's just more hills, more gray sky. They say the Caledonians live out there, wild men who don't know the rule of law. I've never seen one. I wonder if they look out from their hills and see us, this long line of brown-clad men, slowly, painfully, digging a line across their world. Do they laugh at us? Or are they afraid? I don't know which would be worse. Last week, a boy from a cohort down the line was killed. Not by the enemy. A section of the ditch wall collapsed after a heavy rain. He was buried. It took them an hour to dig him out. He was just a boy, younger than me, from somewhere in Spain. He came all this way to die in the mud. There was no ceremony. We are soldiers, but his death wasn't a soldier's death. It was a quarrying man's death. They took his body away. The next day, we were back at work. The ditch must be dug. 20 more years. I have served 5. I have 20 more to go. I try to picture it. 20 more years of this ache in my back. 20 more years of this rain. The thought is so heavy, it's hard to breathe. I signed that paper to be a part of something great, to be a Roman. I am a Roman, but I thought that meant standing tall with a shield and a spear. I didn't know it meant being bent over with a shovel. The embers are almost black now. The rain is getting harder. Sextus has rolled over and the snoring has stopped. It's quiet. I should sleep. The horn will come too soon. I close my eyes, and I see the ditch. Even in the dark, behind my own eyes, the ditch is there, waiting for me. And so the voice from the damp leather tent fades, leaving behind only the lingering echo of its quiet truth. Marius's complaint, etched in the weariness of his bones, was the unspoken anthem of the Roman frontier. His experience was not an anomaly. It was the fundamental reality for the majority of soldiers who served the empire. The great secret of the Roman military, the one conveniently omitted from the triumphant sculptures and epic poems, was that the legionary was often more of an engineer and a laborer than he was a warrior. The Roman army was, without question, the most effective and disciplined construction firm in the ancient world. The same organization that allowed a centurion to fight as a single cohesive unit also allowed it to quarry stone, fell timber, and dig ditches with unmatched efficiency. The sword, the gladius, may have conquered the provinces, but it was the pickaxe, the dalabra, that secured them. The legions built the roads that bound the empire together, arteries of stone and gravel that stretched from the sands of Mesopotamia to the misty shores of the Atlantic. They erected the bridges, raised the aqueducts, and constructed the forts that projected Roman power into hostile territories. This relentless activity served a dual purpose. On a practical level, It created the infrastructure necessary for supply, communication, and defense. But on a psychological level, it was a profound statement of intent. A perfectly straight road driven through a wild forest, or a massive stone wall carving a line across an entire country, was a declaration that this land was no longer barbarian, but Roman. It was an imposition of order, of logic, of permanence upon a chaotic world. To the Emperor Hadrian, his Great Wall was a masterpiece of strategic consolidation. To the historian Tacitus, it was a symbol of imperial majesty. But to Marius and the thousands of men like him, it was a daily battle against the earth itself. The grand strategy was an abstraction. The immediate reality was the strain in his back, the blisters on his hands, and the endless rain. The promise of glory seemed a distant star, obscured by the low gray clouds of his daily existence. This relentless toil, this reshaping the world one basket of mud at a time, was of course a job. It was a career undertaken for a promise of payment and security. But even this simple transaction, the exchange of a soldier's time and effort for the emperor's coin, was far more complex than the recruitment posters ever suggested. Let us now turn our attention from the physical cost of service to its financial realities, as we listen to a young soldier in a fort in Germania coming to terms with his payday.
We travel now, leaving the damp, green hills of Britannia behind. Our journey takes us southeast, across the choppy waters of the Oceanus Germanicus, and into the vast, dark heartland of Germania. Here, the frontier is not a wall of stone, but a river, the mighty Rhine. For centuries, this wide, flowing body of water has served as a boundary, a line between the ordered world of the Roman provinces and the immense, brooding forests that stretch endlessly eastward. The air here is different, crisper in the autumn, and carrying the sharp scent of pine needles and cold stone. The winters are fiercely cold, locking the land in ice and silence. Our setting is not a temporary construction camp, but a permanent legionary fortress, a testament to Rome's enduring presence. Imagine a great, fortified town, its high timber and stone walls punctuated by defensive towers. Inside is a world of rigid order. Streets laid out in a perfect grid separate long, tiled-roof barracks from the massive granaries, the bustling workshops, and the sprawling hospital. At the very center of the fort stands the Principia, the headquarters building. This is the administrative and spiritual heart of the Legion. It is here, in a sacred, chapel-like room, that the Legion's standards are kept, the gleaming golden eagles and the banners of each cohort. And it is here that the Legion's wealth is stored.
For the common soldier, the promise of wealth, or at least a steady income, was one of the most powerful incentives for enlistment. A young man from a poor farming family could earn an annual salary, a stipendium of 300 denarii. To him, this was a fortune, a path to a life his father could never have dreamed of. This pay was distributed 3 times a year, in installments that became major events in the quiet routine of garrison life. Yet, the image of a soldier receiving a heavy purse of silver coins is a misleading one.
The financial reality of a legionary's life was a complex and often frustrating system of compulsory debits and carefully managed savings. The army, in its infinite wisdom, was not simply an employer. It was a bank, a landlord, and a supply store, all rolled into one. Before a single coin touched a soldier's hand, a series of deductions were made from his pay. First came the cost of food, the cibaria. Though the army provided the grain, salt, and sour wine that made up the daily rations, it was not free. The cost was meticulously calculated and subtracted from each man's account. Then came the deductions for equipment. While a soldier was issued his initial arms and armor, the maintenance and replacement of his personal kit, his heavy hobnailed boots or caligae, which wore out quickly on long marches, his woolen tunics, his cloak, his bedroll, all came out of his own salary.
Furthermore, every soldier was required to contribute to a burial society, a collegium funeraticium. This was a form of insurance, a small deduction from each payday that guaranteed a man a proper burial and a respectable headstone should he fall in service far from home. In a world where an unmarked grave was a terrible fate, this was a necessary, if begrudged, expense. Finally, the army administration would withhold a portion of each soldier's pay in a mandatory savings fund. This money was technically the soldier's, but it was held for him in the legion's treasury, often managed by the standard-bearer or signifer of his century. This ensured the men had funds for special occasions and religious festivals, but it also served as a powerful tool of control. A soldier with all his savings locked in the fort's treasury was far less likely to desert. So the great payday was not a windfall. It was a moment of accounting, of seeing how much of one's hard-earned salary had been consumed by the machinery of the army itself. It is on such a day that we find our next subject, a young recruit we will call Lucius. He is perhaps in his 3rd year of service, stationed here on the cold German frontier. He is from a small village in the hills of central Italy and is still naive to the ways of the Legion. The initial excitement of his new life has faded into the predictable rhythm of drills, patrols, and garrison duties.
Imagine him now, sitting on the edge of his straw-stuffed bunk in the cramped quarters he shares with 7 other men. The barracks room is narrow and dim, smelling of leather, wool, and oiled metal. He holds in his hand not a bag of coins, but a small wax tablet. Scratched into its surface by a clerk in the headquarters building is his financial statement. The numbers swim before his eyes, the grand total of his pay installment, and below it a long, neat column of subtractions. And for Lucius, there is an additional painful deduction, the repayment of a personal loan he took from the signifer to properly celebrate the festival of Saturnalia a few weeks prior. The memory of the extra wine, the roast pork, and the games of chance now feels like a bitter indulgence. The official tally on the wax tablet tells one story, a story of credits and debits, of careful military bookkeeping. But the true, more painful accounting is the one happening now in this young soldier's mind.
let us listen to a post from Lucellus as he stares at the unforgiving numbers on his pay account and confronts the harsh arithmetic of a legionary's life.
This wax tablet is small, but it feels heavier than my shield. I've been staring at it for so long, the scratches are starting to blur. There are 2 columns of numbers. In the first column, at the top, is a big number, 100 denarii, my pay for these last 4 months. When I first saw it, for a second my heart jumped. It's a good amount of money, more money than my father sees in a year. But then my eyes went to the second column, the list of deductions, and my heart fell right back down into the mud with my boots. The number at the very bottom of the tablet, the amount that is actually mine, the amount they have added to my savings account, it's barely anything. 7 denarii. 7 for 4 months of patrols, of drills, of standing watch in the freezing wind that comes off the Rhine. I feel sick. I trace the lines with my finger. First, food. They take money for the porridge that tastes like wet sawdust. They take money for the hard bread that you have to soak in water just to chew. They take money for the sour wine that's more vinegar than anything else. At home, my mother would weep if she saw the food they give us, and she would curse the heavens if she knew I had to pay for it from my own wages.
Next, boots. It says collegae, 1 pair. A big chunk of my pay, gone. I remember telling the quartermaster my old ones were falling apart. The sole on the right foot was completely gone, and the hobnails were worn smooth. On our last patrol, every step was agony. I couldn't keep up. The centurion told me if I didn't get new boots, he'd have me cleaning the latrines for a month. So I got them. They are good, sturdy boots, but to see the cost written here, it feels like a punishment. You walk until your feet are raw for Rome, and then you pay Rome for the leather to do it all again. Then there's the entry for the burial club. I hate this one. It's not much, just a few coins, but it feels cold. I remember when young Titus from the next barracks died of the fever last month. He was from a town near mine. We came here on the same barge. They buried him outside the fort, and the club paid for a stone with his name on it. His friends said a few words. It was proper, so I know why we have it, but it feels like I'm paying for my own funeral 4 months at a time. A small down payment on my own death. And then there's the line that makes me feel like a fool. The one that makes my face burn with shame. It just says, loan repayment, signifer cauta. It's the biggest number in the whole column, more than my food and my new boots combined.
It all comes back to Saturnalia. For 1 week, the whole fort felt different. The centurion served us our food. We were allowed to gamble, to wear colorful clothes. There were no drills. It was a taste of freedom, a breath of warm air in the middle of a long winter. My friends and I, we played dice. We drank more of the good wine than we should have. We even bought a piece of roasted port from one of the camp followers. It was the best thing I've tasted in 2 years. For a few days, I didn't feel like a soldier. I felt like a man again. But the money ran out. My little bit of spending cash was gone. And the party was still going. My friends were heading to another game. I didn't want to be left behind. I didn't want to be the one who had to go back to the barracks and sit in the dark. That's when Coda found me. He's our standard bearer. An older man, with a scarred face and eyes that see everything. During the festival, he was all smiles. He clapped me on the back. "Short on coin, Lucius?" he asked. "It happens. Saturnalia comes but once a year. Don't miss it. Take a small loan. You can pay me back on payday. Easy." It felt like a kindness. I was so grateful. I took the money, and the party continued. I laughed, I drank. I lost most of it at dice, but I didn't even care. I was happy. Now I see it here, written in the wax. A debt. Koda wasn't smiling when I saw him this morning. He just nodded at me, his eyes cold and flat. He knew payday was coming. He knew he'd get his money. With interest. I feel like the biggest fool in all of Germania. I traded a few nights of laughter for 4 months of being completely broke.
The worst part is the letter I was going to write. I promised my family I would send money home. I told my father I was earning a good wage. I wanted to send a few silver coins to my mother, maybe enough for my little sister to have a new ribbon for her hair. I pictured my father in the village, showing the coins to our neighbors. "My son, the Legionary," he would say. "He is doing well." Now I can't send anything. I have 7 denarii to my name, and that's locked away in the Legion treasury. I can't touch it even if I wanted to. I will have to write a letter home and lie. I'll say the pay was delayed. I'll say I'm saving for something important. The shame of it feels worse than the cold. I look across the room. Old Marcus is sitting on his bunk, polishing his helmet with a piece of oiled cloth. He didn't even go to the clerk's table. He's been in the Legion for 15 years. He knows the system. He told me once, "The army gives you a little freedom, Lucius, just so you'll hang yourself with it." I didn't understand him then. I do now. This tablet is a lesson, a hard one. No more loans. No more trying to live like a free man on the army's time. I will be like Marcus. I will eat the bland porridge, and I won't complain. I will mend my own tunic instead of buying a new one. I will save every last copper coin. I will turn my back on the laughter and the wine because I see it now. The pay isn't the 100 denarii. That's the bait. The pay is the 7 denarii at the bottom. That is the truth. And the truth is, I am poorer now than I was when I left my father's farm.
Lucius's bitter lesson, learned from the cold scratches on a wax tablet, was a rite of passage for countless young men who entered the service of Rome. His story of a fleeting moment of joy, followed by a long season of regret, was repeated in barracks from the deserts of Africa to the forests of Dacia. The Roman army's financial system was a marvel of psychological engineering, designed not merely to compensate its soldiers, but to manage and control them. By acting as the sole provider of all necessities and deducting the costs at the source, the army created a closed economic loop within the fortress walls. The silver denarius was less a coin to be spent freely and more a unit of account, a number in a ledger that tracked a soldier's worth to the institution. This system fostered a culture of thrift and discouraged the vices of civilian life. A soldier with little or no disposable income was a soldier who was less likely to cause trouble in the local settlements, less likely to fall into deep gambling debt with outsiders, and, most importantly, less likely to possess the means to desert his post. His accumulated savings, held securely within the sacred shrine of the Principia, became a golden chain binding him to his 25 years of service. For a young man like Lucius, the sting of his mistake was personal, a matter of broken promises and youthful foolishness. But for the system, it was working as intended. He had learned a valuable lesson about discipline that no amount of parade ground drilling could instill. He would likely become a more frugal, more focused, and therefore more reliable soldier because of it. The long-term promise was not the meager pay that trickled into his account 3 times a year. The true reward lay at the very end of service, the honorable discharge, the grant of land, and the substantial severance bonus or premia that could set a man up for life. This distant goal was the light at the end of a long tunnel, a tunnel filled with deductions, austerity, and the quiet management of a soldier's every need and desire. Yet beyond the financial pressures within the fortress walls, and beyond the physical exhaustion of the construction trench, lay a different kind of struggle. This was a battle fought not against debt or stubborn rock, but against the slow, creeping enemies of silence, darkness, and the legionary's own wandering mind. For many soldiers stationed on a peaceful frontier, the greatest trial was not found in the heat of battle or the shock of a payday, but in the endless, lonely, and profoundly boring hours of the night watch. Let us travel now to a small, isolated watchtower on the Rhine, to stand vigil with a man whose only company is the sound of the wind and the thoughts inside his own head.
From the calculated order of the fortress and the inner world of a soldier's finances, we journey outward to the very edge of the Roman frontier. We find ourselves on the banks of the great Rhine River, a natural border that is both a defensive line and a constant reminder of the vast, unconquered lands that lie beyond. Our focus narrows now, from the bustling life of a full legion to the profound solitude of a single, isolated watchtower. Imagine a simple, sturdy structure of timber and stone rising 3 stories high from a small clearing near the riverbank. It is one of dozens, perhaps hundreds of such towers that stand like lonely sentinels along the length of the German frontier, each just within signaling distance of the next. The ground floor is a storage space and a cramped shelter where the small garrison of men sleeps and eats. The top floor is an open platform, exposed to the elements, offering an uninterrupted view of the dark river and the even darker forest that presses in on the opposite shore. A single lantern hangs from a hook, its flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows and pushing back the immense darkness by only a few precious feet. The time is the deepest part of the night. The Romans divided the hours from sunset to sunrise into 4 watches, and this is the 3rd watch, the Vigilia Tertia. It is the space between midnight and the first hint of dawn, a time when the world seems to hold its breath. The silence is absolute, a heavy blanket broken only by the whisper of the wind through the pines and the gentle, rhythmic lapping of the river against the shore. For the man on duty,
This silence is both a comfort and a threat. It means there is no immediate danger, but it also gives his own mind far too much room to wander.
The man on this watch is not a legionary. He is an auxiliary, a soldier recruited from one of the many non-citizen peoples living under Roman rule. His name is Flavus, and he is a Gaul. His grandfather might have fought in the armies of Vercingetorix against the legions of Julius Caesar. Now, 2 generations later, Flavus wears the armor of Rome, carries its weapons, and pledges his allegiance to its emperor. He does this not for the higher pay of a legionary, but for the ultimate prize offered to auxiliaries who completed their 25 years of honorable service, the promise of full Roman citizenship for himself and for his children. It is a transformative bargain, an exchange of a lifetime of service on the dangerous fringes of the empire for a place within its very heart. Auxiliary soldiers like Flavus were the eyes and ears of the frontier. They garrisoned the small forts and lonely watchtowers, patrolled the forests, and bore the brunt of the daily low-level friction with the tribes across the border. And for them, as for all soldiers on a supposedly peaceful front, the most relentless and insidious enemy was not a barbarian warband, but boredom. An infantryman's life on the frontier was famously described as long periods of intense monotony, punctuated by brief moments of sheer terror. The challenge of the night watch was to remain vigilant through the endless hours when nothing happened, so as to be ready for the single, terrifying minute when something might. The human mind is not built for this kind of passive alertness. In the deep dark, deprived of sensory input, the imagination begins to play tricks. The silhouette of a wind-blown fir tree resolves itself into the shape of a creeping scout. The rustle of a foraging animal in the undergrowth sounds exactly like a footstep snapping a twig. The cry of a night bird becomes a signal. To stand watch was to exist in a state of sustained low-grade paranoia, which was utterly exhausting. The greater danger, however, was its opposite, complacency. After 100 nights of seeing nothing but trees and shadows, a man's mind could be lulled into a false sense of security. His gaze might soften. His patrols of the narrow platform might become less frequent. He might lean against the parapet and allow his heavy eyelids to close just for a moment, and that moment was the one his commanders feared most. The punishment for sleeping on watch was death, a brutal necessity to enforce the vigilance upon which the entire frontier's security depended. So, a soldier like Flavus had to invent ways to fight a war against his own mind. He would pace the length of the wooden platform, his hobnailed boots making a familiar, grounding sound. He would count the visible stars, tracing the slow, silent arc of the constellations across the sky. He would mentally catalogue his equipment, disassembling and reassembling his spear in his mind. He would name the familiar landmarks shrouded in darkness, the crooked oak tree, the large gray rock near the river's edge, the bend in the water. These were small rituals of consciousness, tiny anchors to keep his mind from drifting away on the vast, silent sea of the night. In this profound solitude,
The mind craves stimulation, a voice to cut through the quiet. It is in this state, stranded between vigilance and exhaustion, that a soldier might begin to talk to himself, to have a conversation with the moon, or to reach out into the void with a silent plea for engagement. Our next post comes from this lonely place, a message from the third watch by a man trying to battle the immense, soul-crushing stillness of the long night.
The moon set an hour ago. Now there is no light at all, save for the lantern by my feet and the cold, distant stars. This is the third watch, the Serpent's Watch, old Cato calls it. The part of the night where the world is dead and your own thoughts start to crawl out from their hiding places. The wind is the only thing moving. It makes a sound like a long, slow breath through the tops of the pine trees. I've walked this platform 400 times tonight, maybe more. I know every plank. I know the one that groans when you put your weight on its left side. I know the spot near the north corner where the wood is rough and can catch your boot. 14 steps from east to west, 14 steps back. It's a tiny little world, this platform. To pass the time, I name things. On the far bank of the river there is a cluster of rocks. I call them the Three Brothers. They never move. They never change. They are always there when I look. A little further down, a great oak tree leans out over the water. That is the old man. He has been there forever. Naming them makes them feel less like shadows. It makes the darkness feel a little less empty. The star I watch is climbing. My clock. When it reaches the very top of the tallest pine tree on the ridge, my watch will be half over. It's moving so slowly tonight. I think sometimes the gods stop the stars just to laugh at the men on watch. My ears are straining. Every sound is loud in the silence. The lapping of the river, the creak of the timbered tower as the wind pushes against it. A moment ago, an owl screeched in the forest, and my heart jumped into my throat. My hand went to the grip of my spear. It took a long moment for my heart to slow down again. It's always like that. 99 times the sound is nothing. An animal. The wind. But you listen for the 100th time, the time it isn't nothing. The time it's the sound of a paddle dipping silently into the water, or a leather shield brushing against a tree.
That's the hard part of this job, not the fighting. I've only seen one real skirmish in 3 years. The hard part is the waiting, the listening, the staring into a blackness that stares right back. It eats at your mind. You start to see things that aren't there. A flicker of movement in the reeds, a shadow that seems darker than the others. I saw one an hour ago, near the Three Brothers. I was sure of it. I stood so still, I forgot to breathe. My eyes watered from staring so hard. I waited and waited. It was just a branch swaying in the wind. The relief is so strong it makes you feel weak. And then the boredom comes back, even heavier than before. I think the boredom is more dangerous than the fear. Fear keeps you sharp. Boredom makes you soft. It invites sleep, and sleep on watch is death. I think of my home. My village is in the hill country of Gaul. It is never this quiet there. Even at night, you can hear a dog barking, or the sound of a neighbor's cough through the wall. You can smell the wood smoke from the hearths, the scent of baking bread left over from the evening. Here, there is only the smell of pine and cold, wet river mud. It feels like I'm the only person left in the world. 22 more years of this. I try to imagine it.
Thousands more nights spent on platforms just like this one, in forts just like this one, all for a piece of waxed parchment that says my son can call himself a Roman. I hope he understands what it cost. I hope he knows his father spent half his life staring into the dark so that he could live his life in the light. If someone else were up here, I would ask them to just talk. Tell me a story. Ask me a question. Anything to make a human sound. Ask me about my spear. It is good Gallic ash, straight and strong. The iron head was forged in the camp smithy. I polished it myself. It is well balanced. It feels good in my hand. It is my only real friend out here.
Ask me about the Germans across the river. The truth is, I knew nothing about them. The veterans tell stories about them, that they are giants who wear animal skins and worship dark gods in the forest. But all I have ever seen are the lights from their cook fires, miles away. Just tiny orange sparks in the great black emptiness. Sometimes I wonder if there is a man just like me on that side of the river. Is he staring from the darkness of his own forest, watching the light of my lantern? Does he name the landmarks on my side of the river? Is he as bored and as lonely as I am? The star is getting closer to the treetop. Not long now. Not long until I can climb down the ladder and shake Bato awake for the fourth watch. He's a big Thracian with a temper. He will curse me for waking him. I will hand him the lantern and tell him all is quiet. He will climb up here and begin his own 14 steps, his own war against the silence. And I will go to my bunk, and I will fall asleep before my head even hits the straw pillow. But for now, I am still here. My eyes are open. My hand is on my spear. The wind is cold. The river is black. I am a soldier of Rome, and I am on watch, and I am trying very, very hard to not let the silence win.
The voice from the lonely watchtower fades into the sighing of the wind, leaving us with a profound sense of the vast, silent spaces that defined the edges of the Roman world. Flavius's internal battle against the tricks of the dark and the immense weight of boredom was a conflict waged every single night by thousands of soldiers along thousands of miles of frontier. This was the quiet, unglamorous war of vigilance, a struggle whose victory was measured not in territory gained, but in another dawn arriving without incident. Roman military doctrine was built on a foundation of sleepless vigilance. Commanders understood that a fortress was only as strong as its most tired sentry. The entire system of security, the chains of watchtowers, the nightly patrols, and the rigid division of the watches and the unforgiving discipline was designed to combat the natural human tendency towards complacency. Morale and alertness were not abstract virtues, they were strategic resources, as vital as reserves of grain or arrows. An army that slept soundly did so only because a thin line of men like Flavius forced themselves to stay awake. The role of the auxiliaries was particularly crucial in this regard. As non-citizens, they were often given the most grueling and isolated duties, manning the tripwire defenses of the empire. Their constant presence in these small, vulnerable outposts absorbed the daily pressures of the frontier. They were the first point of contact, the eyes and ears that allowed the elite citizen legions in the rear to remain a potent, well-rested strategic force. The lonely vigil of a Gallic auxiliary in a timber watchtower was therefore an essential component of imperial stability. His fight against the encroaching silence
was a service as vital as any fought on a chaotic battlefield. What sustained a man like Flavius through thousands of such nights? What kept Marius digging his endless ditch, or encouraged Lucius to endure his financial hardships and learn the army's bitter lessons? It was the promise of an ending, the promise of 25 years of service faithfully completed, the promise of an honorable discharge, a pension, and a new life as a respected man of property. For the auxiliary, it was the ultimate prize of Roman citizenship. This was the light that glimmered at the end of the long, dark tunnel of military life. Yet for a man who had known nothing but the rigid structure and sworn brotherhood of the army since he was a boy, the imminent arrival of this long-awaited peace could be a source of its own quiet, unsettling dread.
Let us now arrive at that long-awaited destination, the final goal that shimmered on the horizon for Marius in his ditch, for Lucius with his empty purse, and for Flavius on his lonely watchtower. We travel to the end of a soldier's service. Our setting is Dacia, a rugged mountainous province east of the Danube, conquered for its rich gold mines a generation ago by the Emperor Trajan. This is a land still being absorbed into the Roman world, a place where new cities are rising and Roman culture is being planted in soil that still remembers the taste of foreign blood. It is here, in a newly founded veteran colony, a colonia, that the empire fulfills its ultimate promise to its soldiers. Upon completing their 25 years of service, veterans were often granted plots of land in conquered territories like this one. This policy was a stroke of strategic genius. It rewarded loyal soldiers, provided a pool of trained men to defend a new province, and seeded the frontier with Roman families who would spread the Latin language and Roman customs. Imagine a valley where a new town is being laid out by military surveyors. A grid of streets is etched into the earth. Timber frame houses are being erected, and stretching out from this nascent town are neat squares of allocated farmland, some still covered in tree stumps and wild brush, waiting for the plow. It is a place of raw beginnings, a world of potential being built from scratch.
Here we meet our final subject, a man named Septimus. He is 43 years old. The sun of 3 continents has weathered his face, leaving deep lines around his eyes. A pale, puckered scar runs from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a skirmish in Pannonia 2 decades ago. He moves with the stiff, economical grace of a man whose body has been shaped by a lifetime of marching and hard labor. He has served his 25 years. He has survived. He is, in every sense, a veteran of the legions. For all of his adult life, this moment was the dream. The honesta missio, the honorable discharge, was the mythical endpoint, the reward for a lifetime of obedience and hardship. It meant freedom from the centurion's vine staff and the blare of the morning horn. It meant owning his own land, being his own master, and finally enjoying the peace he had spent his life securing for others. The promise has been kept.
He has been formally discharged. He stands now at the edge of his own designated plot of land, a generous parcel with a view of the distant Carpathian mountains. The deed, a bronze diploma, is safely stored among his few possessions. And yet, as he stands here, on the threshold of his new life, a profound and unsettling anxiety has taken root in his mind. For a quarter of a century, the Legion was his entire world. It was his mother and his father. It was his trade and his religion. His identity was forged in its rigid structure. He was Septimus of the 3rd century, of the 5th cohort, of the Legio 13 Gemina. His life was governed by a clear chain of command, a predictable routine, and a set of unwavering rules. He knew his place. He knew his duties. He knew the men to his left and right would stand with him, just as he would stand with them. His tentmates, his contubernium, were the only family he had ever truly known.
Now, all of that has been stripped away. Who is he, if not a soldier? He is just Septimus, a man with a plot of land he does not know how to farm. His skills are for a different world. He knows how to build a fortified camp in a single afternoon, how to strip and clean a piece of armor, how to read the flight of an enemy's arrow, and how to stand his ground in a shield wall. But does he know when to plant wheat? Does he know how to negotiate the price of an ox? Does he know how to speak to civilians whose lives and concerns are a mystery to him? The unstructured freedom of civilian life, which he had craved for so long, now feels like a vast, terrifying emptiness. He looks at his hands. They are scarred and calloused, shaped to hold a spear and a shield, not a hoe. He thinks of his comrades, the men still in the fortress just a few miles away. They are probably sharing their evening meal now, their familiar jokes and complaints echoing in the barracks. It is a world he understands, a world where he is respected for his experience. Here, in this new life, he is a novice, as green as any young recruit on his first day. The thought of re-enlisting, of returning to that familiar world, is a powerful temptation. As a veteran evocatus, he would be welcomed back, given lighter duties, and afforded great respect. It would be a return to purpose, to community, to the only life he truly knows. His life's ambition has been achieved. The land is his, the peace is his, and he has never felt more lost. Let us listen now to the quiet, conflicted thoughts of a man standing on the precipice of peace, a veteran who has begun to fear the very freedom he fought so long to earn.
This is my land. The clerk at headquarters pointed to it on a waxed map yesterday. Plot 74, Western Slope, he said, not even looking up. It's yours, veteran. Congratulations. He handed me the bronze diploma. It feels heavy in my pack, heavier than 25 years of pay. I am standing on it now. My land. The soil is dark and seems rich enough, but it's covered in rocks and thick roots.
The stumps of felled trees are like broken teeth sticking out of the ground. It will take me a year just to clear it, maybe more. I should be feeling pride. I should be swelling with the satisfaction of a goal achieved. But I feel nothing. A strange, quiet hollowness in the pit of my stomach. For 25 years, this was the vision that got me through. Through the biting cold of a German winter, through the soul-crushing boredom of building a road in Syria, through the terror of a cavalry ambush. I would close my eyes and picture this, a piece of ground that was mine, a small house, a field of wheat swaying in the wind, the sound of quiet. In the dream, the house was always built. The fields were already plowed. It was a finished picture, a place of rest. The reality is just dirt and silence and work that I do not know how to do. I was 17 years old when I left my village in Hispania. I remember the sun was hot and the ground was dusty and dry. I don't remember much else. My parents died of a fever a long time ago. I have no family to go back to. I haven't spoken to anyone from my village in 2 decades. The Legion became my home. The barracks became my village. The men I shared a tent with, they were my brothers. Some are dead. Some were discharged years ago and vanished. Some are still back there in the fort. My family is in that fort.
Yesterday, my life had a shape. The horn would sound before dawn. I would get up. I would make sure the recruits in my section had their gear in order. I would oversee their morning drill. I would report to my centurion, and he would give me my duties for the day. Everything was clear. There was a purpose to every hour, a reason for every action. I knew my place in the world. I was Optio Septimus. I had a rank, a role, a responsibility. This morning, I woke up in a small room I rented in the civilian settlement outside the fort. No horn sounded. The sun was already high. And for the first time in my adult life, no one told me what to do. I was free, and I have never felt so useless. I can do anything I want, and I have no idea what that is. I see the other veterans, the men who took their discharge at the same time. Marcus has his wife with him and 3 loud children. They are already building the walls of their house. He seems happy. He was a smith in the Legion workshops. He knows how to build things. Titus was a farmer's son before he enlisted. He walks his land with a knowing eye, crumbling the soil in his hands. They talk about things I don't understand. The price of seed grain. The best way to build a fence to keep out deer. Yesterday, Titus asked me what I planned to plant first. I just stared at him. I had no answer. I know how to build a rampart that can stop a charging tribe. I know how to treat a sword wound. I know how to march 30 miles in a day with full kit and still be able to fight at the end of it. What do I know of planting? The shame was so sharp it was like a knife in my gut. I made an excuse and walked away.
The fort is so close. From where I'm standing on my land, I can see the eagle's standard glittering on top of the Principia. I can see the smoke rising from the bathhouse fires. It calls to me. The legate himself spoke to me on my last day. "Your service has been exemplary, Septimus," he said. "If civilian life doesn't suit you, the Legion always has a place for an evocatus. We need men with your experience to train the new boys." I think about it constantly. I can walk back through those gates right now. I could have a warm bunk in the barracks tonight. I could eat my meal with men I understand, speaking a language of shared experience that needs no translation. I would have a purpose again. The pay is good for an evocatus. My duties would be light.
and I would be respected. I would be home. I have faced things that would make other men's blood run cold. I stood on a bridge in Dacia with a handful of men and held off a war party for an hour until the cavalry arrived. I have felt the spray of a man's blood on my face. I have never been afraid, not truly. But I am afraid now. It's not a fear of death. It's a fear of emptiness, of waking up day after day in a quiet house with only the wind for company. A fear of failing at this new life. What if I can't make this land grow? What if I end up a lonely old man starving in the middle of the fields Rome gave me for my service? The thought is colder than any night watch on the Rhine. I look down at my plot of land, my future. It is a field of rocks and roots and overwhelming work. Then I look back at the fortress, my past. It is a world of order and brotherhood and purpose. 25 years I've fought for this peace, this quiet, this freedom. And now that I have it, I think I would trade it all for the familiar weight of my armor and a place in the line. Is that what it means to be a soldier? To be so shaped by the Legion that you can no longer fit into the world you fought to protect? I don't know. I truly don't know.
And so Septimus remains on his lonely hill, caught between the past and the future, a monument to the profound and paradoxical nature of a soldier's life. His final, unanswered question hangs in the air, a testament to the quiet anxieties of a man who has been so completely shaped by an institution that he no longer recognizes himself outside of its walls. The Roman legion was designed to be a perfect machine of conquest and control, and to do this, it had to be a total institution. It took young men and remade them, stripping away their old identities and forging new ones in the crucible of discipline and shared hardship. For 25 years, it was a world that provided everything: a bed, a meal, a purpose, a family. A soldier knew who he was, what he was for, and how he fit into the grand scheme of the empire. This system created men of incredible resilience and fortitude, capable of enduring unimaginable conditions. But the psychological cost was high. The skills that ensure survival in the Legion, absolute obedience, reliance on the group, a mastery of violence and logistics, do not always translate to the quiet, independent life of a farmer. The freedom that was the ultimate reward for service could feel like a punishment, a sudden and terrifying abandonment. While many veterans did successfully make the transition, becoming pillars of their new communities, many others faltered. They were adrift in a civilian world whose rules they did not understand, among people with whom they shared no common experience. Septimus's temptation to return to the familiar embrace of the fortress was not a sign of weakness, but a deeply human response to being unmade. He had been taught how to be a soldier, but no one had ever taught him how to be anything else. His dilemma reveals the ultimate hidden cost of empire. The peace a soldier wins for the world can sometimes be a peace he can never truly find for himself.
Septimus's quiet dilemma brings our journey to a close. Through his eyes, and through the eyes of Marius, Lucius, and Flavus, we have touched upon the foundation of the Roman world. It was a foundation built not just of stone and mortar, but of the silent endurance and unrecorded struggles of ordinary men.
The grandeur of Rome, as we so often imagine it, is a story of emperors, senators, and legendary generals. It is a vision of marble and gold, of decisive battles and magnificent triumphs. But tonight, we have listened to a different story, a quieter and more fundamental truth. We have heard that the empire was built as much by the repetitive swing of a pickaxe as by the thrust of a sword. It was paid for not just in treasure, but in the deducted coins from a young soldier's salary. It was defended not only in the heat of battle, but in the cold, silent hours of a lonely night watch. And its promise of a peaceful retirement was, for the men who earned it, a destination that could be as daunting as any foreign land. The lives of these men, the builder, the recruit, the watchman, the veteran, were the threads that formed the great unseen tapestry of Roman power. Theirs was a world defined by endurance, by the slow passage of time, and by the quiet struggles that are rarely carved into monuments. Their voices, though imagined, speak to a timeless human experience. The gap between the promise and the reality, the weight of duty, the ache of loneliness, and the fear of an unknown future. As these stories from the edge of the world fade, let the quiet of the archives settle around you. The watch is over, the work is done. Allow the echoes of the past to recede, leaving only the stillness of the present moment. May your rest be peaceful and your dreams be quiet. Until next time.